I'm going to turn our attention to our booster module training on facilitating family and youth-driven conversations, and we have the results of our initial user testing today. My name is Janet Walker. I work at Portland State University, where I do a bunch of different things, but most relevant for today, I'm co-director with Eric Bruns of the National Wraparound Initiative, and also director of the Research and Training Center on Pathways to Positive Futures. And John Zowski works with me on both of those different projects, and he'll be picking up in a few minutes to talk about some of the aspects of today's presentation. So just really briefly, we're going to talk about the rationale, why we think this was something useful, worth doing, and kind of a little bit of preliminary work that we did that was leading up to this. We're going to talk about a little bit about the content of the booster training, how it was laid out and kind of how it works, because it's as far as I know, a fairly unique approach to training. And then we're going to have a little video that shows more about how it worked, and then we'll talk about the outcomes from our field test evaluation and talk a little bit about what our next steps are. So I'm sure that anybody who is familiar with wraparound knows that the roles are very complex. Anybody that works in wraparound has to have a whole bunch of skills for engaging individuals, for engaging groups, and for facilitating sometimes quite contentious groups of people. And at least my experience of the focus on the role has often been managing that group or team context. And we know that we have observation measures that are based on the team context. But in fact, some of my early work was looking at team interactions, and I kept being reminded by other people, hey, you know, the wraparound team is only a small part of what's going on here. And I am not really aware of the same level of tools that have been developed for those one-on-one interactions. We know that family and youth-driven is the top wraparound principle, so it's something we all take very seriously. And my impression certainly has been borne out by a lot of work now that there's not a lot of clarity regarding what these actually look like in practice. Like, how can you readily, easily, and reliably identify when practice is being family or youth-driven? And increasingly, because of this tool that I'll be talking to you about, that actually John will be mostly talking to you about it, we've been looking at lots and lots of video of practice, and not just wraparound, but other family and youth-driven practices. And I have to say that I don't think that providers have a really clear sense about it, and I think that the results, you'll see some of the comments from our user testing, is also the same thing. There's just an assumption that you'll know how to do it, that if you believe in it, you'll be able to carry it out. And typically, I don't think people are exposed to kind of very specific instruction about how to do and how to recognize family and youth-driven practice. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we reviewed videos that were submitted to the NWI, and also found that that seemed to be the case specifically with wraparound as well. So here, in fact, is what our earlier study. This is all a little bit casual, but what we did was we had solicited videos, and I think we'll probably be putting out a plea for more videos in the future, because we can't do these trainings without real-life videos. They are so much different from mock videos. You don't see the kind of stuff that you see in real videos, in mock videos. So we asked people to send us some videos. They give us permission to use them for training purposes. So our first thing was we thought we would just take some clips out of those videos and ask people to rate them and to comment about what they were seeing as far as whether there was family or youth-driven practice. We actually asked them to look at both in this initial study. We gave them essentially 20-minute videos cut up into 1-minute segments. And for each segment, they were asked to sort of comment. Did you see something that looked strengths-based or that looked like it wasn't strengths-based? Did you see something that looked like it was youth and family-driven or not? And just to kind of see, like, what do people come up with when you ask them in an open-ended way to identify actual practice bits? And essentially what we found was that there wasn't much agreement. There were certain things that people were picking up on. There was a lot of stuff they weren't. And I would say that also there was just a wide divergence of terminology. How were these things described? And it's really hard to communicate about stuff that where there's not a shared understanding of what the reference is. So that, I'll come back to that as part of our rationale. And then in the final segment, we asked people to provide an overall rating on a 4-point scale. It's kind of like beginning, practice, emerging, competence, skilled. And I think on the cheat sheet, oh, I don't think we actually put that on there, but we had a description of what of how to distinguish that. Again, we were just trying to see like what's people's gut reactions. Maybe we would get really clear consensus based on that, but we didn't. So here is just an example. We had 2 videos. So one is the video 1, orange, that we rated as beginning practice, and video 2 that we rated as competent practice. And you'll see that people pretty much rated each video kind of across the board. There were a slight tendency for the video that we thought was better to be rated higher, but not really that clear. Again, maybe that's to be expected. We designed a pretty vague task there. It was just to say, is this something that maybe is worth looking into some more? So again, what were we aiming for with the booster training? We wanted to have more consistency among people about what they're looking for. What does good practice look like? And really importantly, how do you identify not so good practice? Because that might be even trickier. It's not just the absence of things. There's certain things that actually appear that are kind of wrong. And we wanted to focus again on actual practice. What does it really look like? Because that's really different from not actual practice. And how do we label these things? And we call them techniques. So actual things that people do that look so good, that look good or not so good. We also want to give trainees after the opportunity to actually look at videos and do some rating along the lines of the task that we had advisors do previously, as I described before. And then we wanted to create a training that could be done anywhere, anytime, by anybody. It wouldn't take a lot of resources, but would have an impact. So, as it turns out, we divided the techniques into 2 because we have a list of longer techniques that are some of the more advanced techniques. So we kept this one to the beginning ones. And you will see, I didn't try to explain all of these. Some of them will be familiar to you. Some of the ones kind of more towards the end are kind of more likely they're trying to be intuitive groupings of what we think of as allied techniques, allied mini techniques that we kind of keep it in groupings to help people remember what are the main things that we're looking for and to keep the number of things kind of down. I think on the basis of the feedback that we have now, we'll probably reorganize those a little bit. But the general idea is seemed to be pretty good, and there's a list on your sheet. Talks about what are the things, what are the descriptions that we actually gave to people of what those things look like. So for each technique, we started out with kind of a didactic video, which was me talking and with some slides, kind of an overall introduction to what do we mean by family and youth driven. And then we went into each of the techniques and gave kind of what are the hallmarks of good practice and not so good practice, and then we ran through clips of each one, of each type of technique. There were several clips in each section that I kind of narrated a little bit. And that exemplifies some of the common better things and some of the common ways that people kind of undermine themselves, essentially, in doing family and youth-driven practice. So we created a draft, and anybody that participated in this knew that it was kind of a draft. It was not a super finished product, but we wanted to really, before we committed to anything finished, see how it was doing. So we invited all of the experts who participated in the earlier study, of whom 11 agreed to participate and 10 completed. And they would do the booster and providing feedback on usability, acceptability, appropriateness, effectiveness, and on the descriptions of the techniques, because we're really interested in do people kind of agree with how we have characterized these techniques. And then we also invited more typical users from the NWI membership, of whom we had 51 agree to participate and 35 completed. And I think essentially that almost everybody that started completed. We had a very short time frame for this. We gave people 2 weeks. So completion wasn't so much of an issue. It was more people who actually got started on it. And we didn't ask them to do the feedback on the techniques. We asked them just to do the kind of usability stuff. So John's going to talk a little bit about the recruitment since he did all that.
Thanks, Janet. So we started out by sending out thousands of emails, as you can see, and I put a little sort of a chart there so you can see this like funneling effect that happens with email. You send it out to 17,000 people and you get 130 that sign up, and we think that's pretty good. And basically everyone received this announcement that you see there. Let's see. So the way the actual booster was done, once we had recruited our pool of participants, we had to sort of get them up to speed on the virtual coaching platform. And I can't really talk about the booster without talking about VCP first. And basically it's a web-based tool, it's password protected, there's a lot of security features that are built into it, and it allows for viewing, rating, and feedback on video, audio, and PDF document data. So basically what you can do is you can take some kind of record of practice, marry it with some kind of rubric, and then while you're observing or going over the different media, you can give it some kind of rating. And that provides a means also of communicating back and forth between trainer and trainee. And if you want more information and a small demo video, it's at vcponline.com. So what we sent folks were two rather lengthy documents. One was how to use VCP with some diagrams, and you can get a little preview there of the actual rating screen. That you can see the media player is also next to where you would put your ratings and comments. And then there's a cheat sheet on scoring, of which Janet has already shared with you. So the booster consisted of 6 videos altogether. And what I'm showing you here is a list of all the 6 videos. And if there are people in the room, is anyone here that actually did the booster or took it? Okay. I have to make a disclaimer. I was able to fix the glitch that made the, it's a sort of an inside joke. These did not appear in numerical order for everybody here, so that was like an added challenge, like, are you paying attention? And they did great. But it should have appeared this way, 1st through 6th. As you can tell, the beginning was an overview, a didactic video that Janet mentioned. I have an actual video that shows what a bit of that was. Then the folks got a chance to practice doing a rating and then comparing their scores with the expert scores or the NWI scores. And then there was a debrief that further drove home the highlights of what was to be seen in that video. And then they did it again. So without any further ado, we're going to see if we can make the video work here.
So essentially that process was repeated twice. So you got to see 2 videos, rate the 2 videos, and compare to the pretty extensively annotated expert feedback. And I have to credit Celeste for doing those feedback videos, and Charisse also was helping with all of this. We had a total of 45 people who rated the usability, the different aspects. So the first part was we just had we had all the little steps that were kind of demonstrated in that video. We asked you to say, how hard was it for you to do those things? Like, how hard was it to log in? How hard was it to access the first video, move through the video, blah, blah, blah. And so the scale went from 1, or very difficult or confusing, to 5, very simple or intuitive. The mode for all items was either a 5 or 4, so people did not find it particularly difficult, despite we had this ordering glitch that a lot of people commented on. Again, the means were mostly pretty high. There were 5 items that were higher than 4, 5 more items between 3.8 and 4, and then there were some items 4 more items that were below that. The most difficulty was the first video rating, submitting, and comparing. So the first time you did that, it was a little more challenging. The second time around, not so hard. And so the lowest mean was 3.4, was still above the halfway point, so more easy than not easy for people on the scale. So we did a little overall usability scale, which had some questions that were basically, is it simple, intuitive, and are you confident using it? It had a decent internal reliability, and it was a mean of 3.7 on the same 5-point scale, so essentially reflecting very similar number. So acceptability, we had 3 questions here originally, but one of them got really goofed up getting put in. So like the highest rating was in the middle, and it was kind of interesting that we couldn't, it was garbage, the data. So, but basically how engaging was it? Was it interesting and engaging? And how credible did you find it? And you can see we're between 7 and 8 for the first item and close to 8. This is on a 10-point scale. Although a bunch of items you'll see on a 10-point scale from kind of bad to really good. So that was, we couldn't really do a scale. We only had 2 items there. We did appropriateness, some questions, you know, how compatible is this with principles and practice of wraparound? To what extent is it relevant to training wraparound practitioners? How well does it complement existing training? And how important do you think it is for providers to master the content? So you can see there mostly, basically between 8 and 9, again on the 10-point scale. So people seem to find it pretty appropriate. Feasibility, that we could only kind of come up, I could only come up with 2 questions about feasibility, but one, you know, the time required is the first question, so that's kind of between 8 and 9, and the second one was practical to implement in terms of IT resources, including computer and internet. That was a little bit lower, between 7 and 8. The impact, this is something, of course, we're particularly interested. So overall worthwhileness of the training, and considering the time, kind of the payoff, the bang for your buck, we got just about an 8 for that. What level of impact do you think this training will have on your own practice? Again, people, and these are experienced people, between close to a 7, I guess, a little under 7, and similar for these other items. What level of impact would it have on someone just beginning? And what level of impact would it have on someone with a typical or average level of competence in wraparound? You know, we had, the mode for all of these items was, you know, 8 or above, so there were a couple people that really hated it. You know, that's what happens. So, you know, again, most people seem to be pretty positive about it. So are you going to do the next one, the comments?
Sure.
Okay.
And as you can see, we're using our own terminology here in terms of strengths and improvables. But these are some of the, just a very broad overview of the categories of comments that we received from folks regarding the format, content, and feasibility. Basically, the strengths of the format is that people really thought that a remote coaching system would be very useful. It would save time, it would save traveling, and it would, you know, perhaps be very effective. They thought the presentations were very clear and logical, and also to Celeste, that's to both of your credit. And with a little practice, VCP was easy to use. In terms of improvability, there were some navigation issues, as mentioned before. We had also, the way VCP works, there's also a percent completed indicator. That wasn't necessarily part of what we were trying to accomplish, but it really threw people off because this wasn't set up to work with that very well. So we wanted people to ignore it, but people were very fixated on, why was it only 50% complete? But they did fine. And also there was some video and audio quality issues. Some of that really is, it's difficult because a lot of these videos we collected from the field. And in terms of the technology and feasibility, you know, we don't necessarily have the best equipment out there to capture this. I guess on my end, maybe I need to get better video editing skills and up the audio levels a little bit more, or include subtitles. In terms of content, generally acceptable, credible, useful. People, again, felt that it should be shared widely. But on the improvable side, maybe there was too much content for this time, and break this down into smaller trainings. More consistency in terms of technology, and again, with a draft, you would expect that we're still working out the language. And in terms of feasibility, again, people thought that this was accessible to their programs, that the programs would use it. However, there were some concerns about technology requirements and access. And I can tell you, being the kind of the sole technical assistance hub for VCP, there are a lot of issues out there.
Okay, so this is, remember in the beginning I told you we asked the experts to actually review the content. So this reflects primarily the stuff that's on the cheat sheet. So this is very much patterned on earlier consensus building work that we've done through the NWI. We kind of asked people to rate things in terms of 2 different aspects. So one is, how important is this actual concept for inclusion, or this aspect? And you can see there we had 10 people, and across the top pretty much everybody was saying that each of the things was essential. And I think mostly we got some very helpful comments from the optional, and there was that one inadvisable rating. It was mostly about the terminology, really, not that people thought this wasn't related to family or youth-driven practice. And then the wording, I think, is pretty typical. People had suggestions for the wording, so fine as is, again, mostly, but not always mostly, people there, or minor changes, and then there were the occasional people that suggested major changes. And again, all that feedback is really useful and has already helped us to start reconceptualizing or making some tweaks to those categories for the basic stuff. So what's next? We want to revise Booster Module 1. We're thinking about even breaking Booster Module 1 into 2. Originally, this whole thing was only half of the content, but I think that we might be getting into something that looks like 3 or possibly even 4 boosters. Just to keep it a little bit simpler and shorter, because the didactic video was, I don't know, 50 minutes, 45, 50 minutes. So I think it was a lot. So probably just break it into the really simple ones, like open-ended questions and reflections, and do that with the intro part, and then move to the other ones. And each of those would be, 20 minutes instead of a long one. And that way people could kind of focus on just a couple of techniques at a time. Then we want to caption all the video because we got, I would say, a lot of comments that people couldn't hear. We are thinking possibly of, once there is a whole series, of doing a kind of test of some sort at the end, whether that would be the video rating test where people are kind of given okay, here's a video, this is for real, do your best. But we've also thought it's possible people could submit their own videos, and we think we could probably offer CEUs for that. And additionally, as was part of the original thing, we want to do a similar module on strengths-based, so we're building up the content for that now. I feel like there's even less agreement about how you recognize strengths-based practice. I mean, we're all familiar with the strengths inventory, but what does it really look like when it's integrated kind of on a constant, consistent basis, where you're seeing it more or less every minute or so? And we believe that in practice, certainly the practice that we coach for our Achieve My Plan project, we expect to see it every couple minutes. So we are hoping to see how that all works and inject a little bit more of that into daily